All right, here's the next Android assignment, and probably I want to say tied with the most difficult. It was either the next one or like a an assignment, and then one after this where we advance on this, and that was harder because had to advance on it. But this one adds two big things: Kotlin, which we never used before up to this point, as well as database stuff, which we have used. It's just it's the completely new thing of Kotlin with adding a old thing into this new thing that made it pretty difficult. So I'm just gonna start in order here. So with Kotlin, you can do colors and themes. So in my, I just have some basic colors here. This is works basically the same as with when you're using the XML. This is just the Kotlin equivalent of your color file, or I think yeah, your colors file in XML. And then here is the theme. So you pick a font. See, that's not the default font. And then you pick the like a standard typography. So for example, you have what is your headline medium. So you define what font that's going to use, what font weight, what size, etc. So you could have a bunch of different ones. You could so headline medium, body medium. You could have like a body large is just an example. And then also you pick two different colors or two different themes, like what's the color for dark and what's the color for light. There's probably other ones you can do, but these are just these are the two things that everybody uses. And then here is basically kind of how you apply it. So you do based off of version, dark theme, else, light color scheme. And then type, I don't think I ever had to touch this file. So yeah, this is just default typography here. You can see this is never used. So I just put it in the theme. Having it separately is obviously better, but just because of still learning and also just because of this is, I think there was a default one in here. So yeah. Then color picker. This is something that I made that didn't have to make, but I did it to make it once again more oop. This just picks colors based off of the type, because here you see it's Pokemon related, and I'll get to that. So obviously there's a lot of statements here, but there's a lot of different types. You can't really avoid it if you want a unique color for every type. Then I'll do the database stuff in order, because that's easier. So this is our data model. So this is all the information you have that's going to be saved into the database. So here it's just the dex number, the total, like a base stat total of the different base stats. I won't really get into that in super detail. That's not what that information isn't really relevant. It's just the fact that I can save that information into a database. And this data model is has that information. So here you see there's a basic constructor. You can see it's never used, but that's kind of just always a good thing to have. You have our constructor with everything, all large constructor. A toString, which it's what you expect. It just has all the information in a string format. I've made a fancy one that see how it's like a bit more formatted. It reads a bit easier. Then your setters and getters. And here's an interface. It's just basic stuff. You inherit from it. You inherit methods from it. There's not really much to talk about here because I want to talk about the bulk of the methods, not their shells, I guess you would call it. And here's where we save to a database, a local database. So here's just create the table. It's just as a string, just easier to read that way. So you create table, then the table name, which is up here, and then all that information. So of course you have your ID, your primary key, and then a value for each thing. And then we drop the table if it exists already. Then context, that's for Android specifically. DB class, that's what this is. Constructor with your context, and then you have your on create, which doesn't do anything because that's just kind of showing a worse way to do it versus better way to do it. Here you can see it just creates it with SQL, and then the data was getting inserted here. Now it just creates the table and that's it, which is better. Now, if you wanted default data, you make a separate method for it, and that's in here. I'll show it later. So on upgrade, different database version. If you change something, that's something you should do. Uh, Count. So this is implements from the interface, as you can see. Uh, uh, it just gets count from the database, of pretty basic. Then we have our save, which is a really important one. So it takes a data model, obviously. It opens up the database. It makes new content values, and then you put values on each of the columns. So that's why they're also saved as different variables. It's just, so you don't have to repeatedly put them in. You can just use this to make it a little easier. So there's way fewer characters that way. And then obviously, if you change something, it changes it across everything instead of having to do it everywhere manually. So here it just updates all the data except for ID, of course. Then you just insert that data into the database, and so that's why you make this your values. You can put it in there all at once, and then of course you do the good thing of closing the database. And then update. It's just it this was one we were like I've mentioned before. We were given some code, and then we have to do a lot with it. And one of the ones that was already in the interface was update, and in this there's only one thing that you have to update. Access count I'll show you. So if I click this, it's been accessed one time, and now two. So that's the only thing you have to update. So I just made the update that. Then add default rows. This was mentioning earlier where you want if you want default stuff, you should have it as a separate method. And here I do. So what this does, and we didn't have to do it. We could just have like a raw data in here, but I decided to read from a CSV file when I came up with the specifically Pokemon idea. So I had to do a try catch. Well, don't have to, but that's good practice when you're working with something external. In this case, CSV file. Maybe I named it wrong, and then there would be a big old error, and now we can try and catch it with this. And so then we do an input stream to actually open the file, buffered reader to read from it. This just skips the first line because CSV files, if I show you here, the first line is what the information means, and then every line after that is the data itself. And then while the read line is not null, because when it becomes null, you're at the end. And then we have the split because CSV comma separated values. We just put the information in. So we have a little bit of a different thing because there's a true, false, a boolean in there. But if I scroll down, just seeing if there's anything else I want to talk about as I do that. Yeah, so here in the cursor, which is a Google thing, because this is Android, there is no get boolean method. There is, get int, get string, and the advanced version of this I use get blob. But there is no get boolean. So kind of what I did is that I kept it as a boolean in the data model, and then when I have to access it, I kind of see, if it's true, it's one, else zero. So that's why that's there. Everything else is just, saving it to a variable and then just putting it as creating the data model with that data, and then use the save method to save it. And then find all is as you expect. It gets everything. It gets all the data. And then these we didn't have to use. I do implement them in the advanced version, but since I never had to use them here, I didn't implement them. Now main activity, which is pretty beefy. Uh, it'd be better to separate it, but it's kind of just it is what it is. Since I was learning, didn't separate it, but there's a lot that could be separated here, especially since I'm passing down so many variables. I'll show. So here's the main, class main activity, component activity. I make what I need. So there's the color picker, which I showed, DB class, which see it gets the context, which is this main activity, and then set the context and everything we need. So DB find all color picker, and that's for the my app. See how we're kind of handing down. So the stuff that I create here is handed down to my app, which uses this remember window info. I'll show it here. Rotate it. See, it's a different. So that's kind of what that's for. How we can have a different screen. So we have three screens actually. There's this rotated one. There's a kind of a or no, just three. So there's this rotated one. There's this normal one, and then there's if you click that button, it takes you to this more detailed screen. And that sideways isn't for like a portrait or a landscape. It's just for any bigger size device. So obviously, if it's in the landscape, it's a bit bigger. So then we have more information. Show favorite Pokemon card. That's what this is. It's basically an altered version of the normal card, but with a standard or with different format. And obviously, it's show favorite Pokemon card. That's how you because that's based off of how many times it's been accessed. So if I just do this, and then I update it by going like that, see, now Venusaur is at the top. That was a really hard one to figure out. As simple as it may seem to actually work, it was quite hard to figure out. But yeah, so this is kind of how it does. So uh, we do it like this is how we show it. Oh goodness, words are failing me. But this is how the favorite Pokemon is shown based off of this value, and this is how we actually determine it. So I went by names. Probably should go by ID, but since I knew the names were going to be unique, I went by doing it by names. If names is not empty and show favorite Pokemon card, we determine what that favorite is. So it actually is shown all the time. That's just showing it. I was thinking of something else from that. So this is shown all the time, and this is what actually determines what the favorite Pokemon is. And then this is how we do what I said, where it's different screens. And this is the master details on the side, where it's side by side. So show page master, that's this, I believe. I'm just trying to make sure. Yeah, that's what the just text screen is. Oh no, master because it goes back to master. I'm sorry, just it's been a little while since I went through this. So because it calls show each list item, which goes through all of the cards and shows them. So like I said, this is the favorite Pokemon card, and the show favorite Pokemon card uses that. Show each list item just shows every card, and here we can see here's the card content, which is so this is the card, this is the card content. So that's a basic Kotlin stuff. It was a bit hard to figure out at the time, but then I got it and see we're getting information from the database. Then show page details. That's what this one is. The page details, or I guess it would be the details page. I'm just trying to see if there's really anything interesting to talk about. There's just the buttons, the next. I guess it's kind of interesting how, for example, on the first one there's no previous, and then at the last on the last one. There is no next, but that's not really anything fancy. And I don't really have anything else in here because I thought I had more by remembering the advanced version than I did, which ended up being quite a lot. But yeah, pretty simple looking back on it, but at the time it wasn't really simple at all because I was still learning. See how you can scroll. And with the color picker I did just showing here, if it's legendary, the color picker takes the type in the legendary, excuse me, and if Pokemon's legendary, make the gold so it's a little special, and then if it's not, it goes based off of the type. So, for example, normal type Pokemon, that's white, or I guess gray. But yeah, that's what I have to say. The database stuff of this, I'd actually say wasn't the hardest part. It was just to figuring out Kotlin. But the hard part of the database, I guess something to keep in mind if you're ever working with this, is that it is really fussy with the spaces. That's just a normal database like SQL thing. But in here, since it's Java, it won't tell you if you have an error. So if you say miss a space, it just the app will crash. And another way the app will crash is, for example, if say I added another column and then I don't wipe the data on the phone because it's looking for the old table, it will crash as well because there's kind of like a mismatch there. But yeah, this video's uh, getting pretty long, so I'm just gonna end it there, I suppose.